The headlines were easy to miss, but the meaning was impossible to ignore. On July 1st, 2025, in the remote port town of Kitimat, British Columbia, a tanker named Gaslog Glasgow slipped its moorings and sailed into the Pacific. Its cargo, liquefied natural gas, Canada's first ever LNG shipment to Asia. For Ottawa, it was history in motion, the payoff of decades of frustration over being locked into US pipelines. For Washington, it was humiliation, a reminder that America's grip on North America's energy future was no longer absolute. This wasn't just a shipment, it was a signal. Canada had poured 40 billion Canadian dollars into breaking free from US dependency, and now the world's fastest growing markets, Japan, South Korea, China, were taking notice. The question is simple, but the stakes are not. Has Canada just cracked America's energy crown? Or is this the start of an even bigger showdown? For most of the last century, Canada's energy story was written in lockstep with the United States. Pipelines stitched the two economies together like arteries, carrying Canadian oil and gas south to American refineries and cities. Washington set the terms, and Ottawa accepted them. Canada was a dependable supplier, America the indispensable buyer. It was a partnership that gave both nations stability, but it also cemented a hierarchy. The US dictated the tempo, Canada followed. But the seeds of rupture were planted in the shale revolution of the 2010s. As American fields from Texas to Pennsylvania roared to life, the US no longer needed Canada in the same way. Under Trump, the rhetoric hardened. Energy dominance became a doctrine, and US LNG was pitched as the fuel of freedom to allies abroad. For Canadian exporters, the message was clear. Their role had been downgraded from strategic partner to convenient backup. That shift was more than symbolic. It was existential. Ottawa and energy majors like Shell saw a future where reliance on a single customer meant permanent vulnerability. Out of that realization came a radical idea. Canada needed its own Pacific gateway, a route to Asia that bypassed the US entirely. Donald Trump's White House wrapped its entire energy strategy in a single phrase: energy dominance. It wasn't just branding, it was a worldview. The US, Trump promised, would use its shale boom to overwhelm competitors, control prices, and dictate the terms of global trade. American liquefied natural gas shipped from the Gulf Coast and Alaska would be the spearhead of this dominance. At the center of the plan stood the Alaska LNG project, a $60 billion mega scheme billed as America's Pacific Crown Jewel. It envisioned an 800-mile pipeline from the frozen North Slope through mountains and tundra, terminating at an export terminal designed to feed Asia's insatiable demand. The administration sold it as a geopolitical weapon. Japan and South Korea could buy freedom from Russia and China if they signed on to America's plan. But beneath the bravado, cracks spread quickly. The economics were brutal. Construction across permafrost would skyrocket costs, and shipping distances to Asia remained longer than Canada's West Coast route. Investors balked. Tokyo and Seoul, wary of Trump's tariff feuds and his habit of tearing up agreements, refused to commit billions. By 2024, Alaska LNG looked less like a crown jewel and more like a mirage. Then, in July 2025, Canada quietly launched its first LNG cargo. No fanfare, no bluster, just results. Suddenly, Washington's promises of dominance looked hollow against Ottawa's simple proof of delivery. Canada's countermove was years in the making. LNG Canada, a $40 billion Canadian dollar project led by Shell with Asian backers, was designed as a pivot away from dependency on the US. The project's logic was simple: geography, cost, and credibility. From Kitimat, a ship can reach Tokyo or Seoul in less than 2 weeks. From the Gulf Coast, the same journey takes nearly 3, often via the clogged and costly Panama Canal. That time difference translates into contracts won or lost. On price, too, Canada holds an edge. British Columbia's feed gas trades cheaper than the US Henry Hub benchmark, giving exporters more flexibility to undercut competitors. On July 1st, 2025, the Gaslog Glasgow sailed with Canada's first cargo. The symbolism was profound. For the first time, Canada wasn't just a supplier feeding American infrastructure, it was an independent competitor on the global stage. Even though Train 1 of the Kitimat facility was running at half its intended 5.6 million ton annual capacity due to technical issues, the mere fact that shipments had begun was enough to shake the market. Asian buyers took notice. Japan and South Korea, nervous about America's political whiplash, now had a new partner offering stability and shorter routes. Canada wasn't just exporting LNG, it was exporting reliability. And that reliability carried more weight than Trump's slogans ever could. Now, the two neighbors are staring at each other across a widening fault line. The US remains the world's largest LNG exporter, with sprawling Gulf Coast facilities dwarfing Canada's fledgling capacity. Yet its marquee Pacific project, Alaska LNG, has stalled, leaving Washington embarrassed. Canada, meanwhile, has finally achieved the breakthrough it dreamed of, but its victory is fragile. Kitimat's delays and technical troubles are already testing investor patience. In Washington, officials are split. Some argue Canada's shipments should be welcomed as part of a united North American front. Others see them as a direct threat. Every Canadian cargo is one less US deal, one less lever of influence in Asia. That tension mirrors a broader unease. Is Canada still a partner, or has it become a rival? Ottawa faces its own dilemma. Delivering LNG at scale could cement its credibility, but another round of setbacks would turn triumph into humiliation. Communities in British Columbia are watching closely. Promises of jobs and prosperity will sour quickly if the project falters. The truth is stark. America cannot reclaim uncontested dominance, and Canada cannot guarantee flawless execution. Both are trapped in a rivalry where cooperation feels logical, but competition feels inevitable. The fracture point has been reached, and there is no easy path back to the old status quo. For Ottawa, the Kitimat launch was sold as a triumph, proof that Canada could finally compete on the world stage. But victories in the energy business are rarely clean. The LNG Canada project is the most expensive private sector investment in Canadian history at 40 billion Canadian dollars, and that scale means the risks are as large as the rewards. Take Kitimat itself. A small town of fewer than 10,000 people suddenly became the hub of a global experiment. The influx of thousands of construction workers transformed its economy overnight. Hotels overflowed, rents spiked, and hospitals and schools strained to keep pace. Some Indigenous communities signed lucrative benefit agreements, building housing and schools with new revenue. Others raised alarms about cultural disruption and environmental degradation, warning that Canada's climate pledges were colliding head-on with its LNG ambitions. Then there's the technical side. Train 1, designed for 5.6 million tons of annual capacity, has limped along at half that rate due to equipment problems. Revenues are lower than promised, and investors are watching nervously. For the Canadian government, the stakes are political as well as economic. This project was meant to prove Canada could break free from US dependency. If Kitimat stumbles, critics will argue Ottawa mortgaged its credibility for a pipe dream. And yet, the first cargo still mattered. For Japan and South Korea, it signaled a fresh option beyond American LNG. For Canada, it marked independence. The cost is immense. The margin for error razor thin, but the chance to redefine Canada's role in global energy makes those risks unavoidable. For Washington, the shared cost of this rivalry is measured in lost leverage and wounded pride. For decades, US energy firms counted on Canada's gas flowing south, feeding into Gulf Coast export terminals and reinforcing America's global dominance. That assumption is broken. Every ship leaving Kitimat for Asia is not just a Canadian win, it is an American loss. The Gulf Coast exporters feel it first. Their multi-billion-dollar terminals were built on the expectation that Asia would remain a captive market. But Canada's Pacific advantage, shorter shipping times, cheaper gas, no Panama Canal tolls, has changed the math. A Japanese buyer comparing cargoes can now demand discounts from US sellers, knowing Canada is a credible alternative. For American exporters, that means slimmer margins and tougher negotiations. The pain doesn't stop at the docks. With more Canadian gas diverted overseas, US supply could tighten, especially in winter. Utilities in the Northeast and Midwest have already warned of higher heating bills, while farmers who rely on natural gas for fertilizer brace for cost spikes. When energy costs rise, food and manufacturing costs rise with them, a reality that voters notice quickly. And then there's the politics. Trump promised energy dominance as a pillar of American greatness. Yet, while the Alaska LNG project remains stalled by financing gaps and logistical nightmares, Canada quietly shipped its first cargo to Asia. The optics are brutal. America talks about dominance, while Canada delivers. That humiliation may sting more than any price increase. It undercuts the very narrative Washington has been selling for years, that the US is not just a player, but the player. Canada's breakthrough has exposed a truth few in Washington want to admit. The age of uncontested American control over North America's energy future is over. North America now faces a reckoning. Canada has broken through, proving it can chart its own energy path, while the United States struggles to reconcile ambition with reality. Both nations remain bound by geography, yet divided by strategy. For Ottawa, the gamble is whether Kitimat can scale up before technical and political pressures close in. For Washington, the dilemma is whether to treat Canada's rise as a threat to contain or as a partner to embrace. The truth is that neither side can win alone. The question is whether this rivalry will sharpen into fracture or evolve into resilience. So, what comes next? Partnership or collision? If you found this analysis compelling, don't forget to like the video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe for more deep dives.